Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Aboriginal Adult Literacy Campaign panel. My name is Anita Heiss. I'm a Wiradjuri woman from central New South Wales. I'm a Williams from Cowra, Brungle Mission, Griffith and Tumut, and I'm going to be your chair this afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the custodians and caretakers of the country here, the beautiful city, and of course I'm talking about the Kulin Nation. In this session, we'll be hearing from some experts in the field of adult literacy with a joint presentation by Professor Jack Beetson, Janelle Frail and Dr. Ben Bartlett. We will have time for questions, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot. I've already started listing mine, so be prepared. I'll introduce the three panellists in one go, and then Jack will come up and they will speak in succession. So Jack is a Nyimba man who has expertise in facilitation of communications and dialogue across cultures, post-conflict recovery and reconciliation, adult education and training, community development for sustainability, and Indigenous and human rights education. I'm sure there's many people in the room today who, like me, met Jack for the first time back in the 1990s at Tranby Aboriginal College in Glebe. Right now, he's an adjunct professor at the University of New England and one of only 12 people worldwide to have received a United Nations Unsung Hero Award. I think that deserves a round of applause, actually. Jack is chair of the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council Economic Development Advisory Committee, chair of Waste Aid, and regularly undertakes advisory work for government at both the state and Commonwealth level. In the past, Jack has served as the Australian Chair of the Pacific Association of Non-Government Organisations. We'll also be hearing from Miss Janelle Frail, who's also a Nyimba woman who grew up in Brewarrina and has lived there all of her life. In 2015, she became one of the Brewarrina Literacy Campaign facilitators who takes responsibility for the running of the classes. This was her first job. So far, 2 intakes are completed and enrolments have commenced for the 3rd intake. She has learned a great deal from this experience and has grown in confidence. She has become one of the councillors of the local Aboriginal Land Council. Finally, Dr. Ben Bartlett is a public health physician who has worked in Aboriginal health for 35 years, both as a clinician in ACCHOs, mainly in Central Australia, and in PHC service planning and development in both Central Australia and the top end of the Northern Territory. He's interested in applying knowledge of the social determinants of health, especially the control factor, to Aboriginal health, and this has led to his involvement with the literacy campaign. He's currently the convener of the LFLF Technical Advisory Subcommittee of the Foundation's board. Please welcome the panel and Jack to the microphone.
Thanks very much, Anita. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this country and their elders, past and present. Also, I want to acknowledge my own people, the Nyimba people, and my ancestors whose shoulders on which I stand before you today. Without their struggle, without their commitment to a better life for Indigenous people in this country, I wouldn't be here. I also want to acknowledge Lowitja O'Donoghue and Pat Anderson, 2 people that I hold in very high regard and 2 people that have nurtured me and mentored me over the years and certainly helped me correct the things I was doing wrong. And any of you that know them would understand that. There's one other person I do want to acknowledge, and I only seen her about 5 minutes ago, half hour ago, I guess, is Ruthie Sims, who played a big part in my life, and it was just so lovely to see her out the front and here at this conference today. Ben's here, not so much as a technical advisor, but probably as my health advisor. Ben can keep me alive if anything goes horribly wrong. I just want to tell you a little bit at the beginning of this about the adult literacy campaign model that we're running. It originated in Cuba in 1961 when Castro gave the kids in years 6 and 7 a year off school to go and educate the farmers. Cuba went from 50% illiterate to 100% literate and is still the most literate country in the world today. This model is acknowledged by the UN as the best literacy campaign model in the world today. Campaign models and literacy campaigns aren't new. There's been many of them, but this one is the most successful. The model works like this. It works in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the community socialisation and mobilisation, where it gets the community, the whole community, not just the Aboriginal community, supporting the idea of a need for the adult community to become literate. That involves local Aboriginal people being trained in doing surveys and questionnaires with the local community, training in facilitating in the method itself, and training in mobilising, not just the Aboriginal people, but the non-Aboriginal people and agencies within community, so that everybody becomes involved in one way or another in encouraging Aboriginal people back into literacy classes. The second phase is the class phase. There's 65 one-hour classes that are run for the participants. In the western area we're working along the Darling River, where this would normally run 1 hour per day, we've had to change the model to 2 hours, 3 days a week because of the high mortality rate in those communities. So the classes are run Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday because sorry business is usually conducted on Thursday and Friday. Where this campaign started in Wilkenya, the average life expectancy of the Aboriginal man is 38 years of age. It really makes you begin to think about the words of the great author Frank Hardy when he said, if Australia is the lucky country, Indigenous people must be the unluckiest people on earth. The third phase is the use it or lose it phase. For about 11 weeks, our students go and practice what they've learnt. They engage in activities that cause them to use their newly learnt skills of reading and writing. In other words, consolidating what they've learnt. In Brewarrina, which is my country, and my countrywoman will be up next to talk about her experience. In Brewarrina, in a place where government and other providers are graduating people at a rate of 10% in certificates levels 1 and 2, the Yes I Can, or the Yossi Puedo, which is all the Spanish I know, so please don't try and talk to me in Spanish after, is graduating people at a rate of 76%. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. So rather than me carrying on now, because I'm going to come back at you later, I just now want to introduce my countrywoman, Janelle Frail, to come up and just share with you some of her experience in working with our mob out bush. Thanks, Janelle. I'm standing here with Janelle because I'm too nervous to stand back there on my own.
Hello everyone. First, I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land where we gather for this conference. Thank you for your welcome. My name is Janelle Frail, a proud Nimba woman from the small western New South Wales community of Brewarrina. I'm so happy to be here today with Jack and Ben, and I thank the organisers for the invitation. But as you most probably can see, I'm very nervous. First time I've been speaking publicly like this, and so you'll have to bear with me. My role in the campaign is as one of the Yes I Can facilitators. We assist the students in the classroom as they watch each lesson on a DVD. I just want to share with you a little bit of my story as part of the Yes I Can adult literacy campaign. When Jack brought the campaign to Bree in February 2015, I was leading a fairly chaotic life. One of the local elders, Auntie Grace Gordon, encouraged me to join the campaign as a household literacy survey worker. 8 of us locals got trained in how to do the survey, and off we went knocking on people's doors, talking about the campaign and finding out if anyone was interested in joining. I loved it. I was really surprised to find out how many of our mob wanted to learn to read and write. It was great to talk to people about something positive too. Later, Grace encouraged me to apply for the job of literacy facilitator, and to my surprise, Jack offered me the job in August 2015. I had only worked a little bit once before, so this was a huge step for me. We trained in how to deliver Yes I Can lessons. We learned about the campaign model and how this model came to us from Cuba via Timor-Leste. I have worked now as a facilitator for almost 15 months. It hasn't always been easy. It isn't always easy in my community to be a worker and a role model. But I've kept at it, and I feel so inspired and really want to help my own mob have a chance like I have. This campaign had so many positive outcomes for me and my people. We see the students change each day. For example, they open up more to us. It's just like one of our students couldn't even read his own mail. He had to take it to somebody else to read, and today he's proud, he's standing there, he could open his letter, he'll come down to us and read the mail to us now. Yeah, so that's the big difference we can see in them. And like the students, I too have changed. I've grown more and more confident. When we had our first intake, we had an elder. We had age range from 16 to 67 was our eldest. There were 17 students, and one of the elders, lovely old lady, didn't even know how to hold a pen properly. She thought it was just for scribbling. And then one day she sat down and she told me a story about how she had to leave school when she was 13 to help her parents raise the younger children or go out and work to help the family. And stories like that, it's just heartbreaking, thinking about how people was back in the days and that. And there was a family of 4 in there, like the grandmother, 2 daughters and a grandson, and that was really good to see a whole family like that in there. And like the students, I too have changed, more confident in that. And what makes it work for us when so many other things fall over? I think it is mainly because our mob are teaching our own mob. We are given the opportunity to run the campaign, to run it in a place that's ours, and to make decisions and to make mistakes without it being the end of the world. I can honestly say that the impact of this campaign on me and the students is extraordinary. I can't wait for the funding to come through to run the 3rd intake in our little community of Brewarrina. Thank you.
Too deadly. Yeah, good old Bree. I'd now like to invite Dr. Ben Bartlett up just to say a few words around the social determinants of health and the correlation between those positive outcomes and literacy. Ben?
Thanks, Jack. We get stuck in our silos, and one of the issues with this is that health is in one silo, education is in another silo. So it took a while to actually try and overcome that problem, and I think there were 2 key reasons why we overcame it, and that was Pat Anderson and Donna Archie, who both had experience in the education sector and the health sector. And it was Lowitja that provided a small grant to enable us to explore the possibilities after some colleagues had had experience in Timor-Leste. So we see the campaign from a public health point of view as an intervention to address some of the social determinants of health. And as you all know, there's a long, long list of social determinants of health, and some of them offer opportunities for intervention, and some of them offer opportunities for researchers and whatnot to cherry pick them. The thing that really, the major research that really, I think, showed the importance of what I've called the control factor, and I wasn't the first, of course, to do that, was Marmot's work with the Whitehall studies, which I imagine most of you have some familiarity with. And basically, the importance of that study is that it showed, from a prospective project looking at British civil servants, so it had nothing to do with Indigenous health specifically, they allowed for all of the known risk factors: high blood pressure, smoking, weight, cholesterol, all those things. But they found that after 10 years, there was a 2 to 3 times mortality from not only the people at the bottom of that hierarchy, but the chief executives in the civil service compared to the professional groups, both of which we would look and say, well, most of their social determinants of health have been solved. There was still this 2 to 3 time mortality gap. And Marmot concluded that that was related to what people have broadly called the control factor. And I must say we don't fully understand what that's about. But we think it is partly about agency. If people haven't listened to the Boyer lectures this year, they're well worth listening to get a handle on what Marmot's talking about. So I want to go just very briefly, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but essentially people know about the fight or flight thing. And there's a tendency for people to say that stress is a bad thing, and they think of executives and people in positions of power. For those people, stress is a very positive, productive thing. It increases their self-esteem. It increases their ability to be in control. So when a perceived threat comes, there's the fight or flight reaction, which involves physiological changes, which are up there. But when the threat passes, those with power go back into a resting state where their internal organs get better perfused by blood, etc. But those without power, those who have chronic stress, unresolved, continual stress, go into this chronic state. And that chronic state is marked by reduced blood flow to essential organs like kidneys and liver, and we all know about the problem with kidney disease. It damages the blood vessels, etc. So let's face it, it's chronic stress that's a danger. Acute stress, if you've got the power to deal with it, is good for you. And just wanted to try and, it's a bit of a complicated diagram, but it's trying to show the pathway to the sort of actual illnesses that people face: diabetes, heart disease, stroke, renal disease, infections and cancer. And there are pathways there that are moderated to some extent by people's social supports and those sorts of things, but it's the psychosocial demands or stressors that are largely responsible for these problems. And that's all I've got to say.
I'm coming back for a second go because on the 27th of May 1967 there's a referendum held in this country that gave Aboriginal people the right to speak. And as most of you that know me would know, I haven't shut up since. I just want to say this and acknowledge another group of people. I want to acknowledge firstly Donna Archie as the chair of the Literacy for Life Foundation and trusted me enough to accept that position. But I want to acknowledge another group of people, and it's our young leaders, whoever and wherever they are. I want to, up front, offer my support and my confidence in them to take this struggle forward. And moreover, if I only had one piece of advice to give the young Aboriginal leadership, is take risks. We didn't get to where we are by sitting on our hands and twiddling our thumbs. We got here because our forebears, our ancestors took the risks necessary to get us where we are today. And I have absolute confidence in our young leaders to take this struggle forward, some of who are in this room and have worked with me during the campaign, including Lillian Lucas, who's sitting just up the back there, without whose support and hard work, we wouldn't have got half the stuff done in places like Burke and Brewarrina and Gonya that we did. What literacy does is it actually facilitates and allows adults to make better choices. We know this, not just through anecdotal evidence, but evidence now that we've gathered over the last few years. In Wilcannia, and I just want to relate this to this gathering, this health gathering, this wellbeing gathering, because health and wellbeing begins with literacy. Health and wellbeing is absolutely dependent upon being able to read the dosage on a medicine bottle. And in many of our communities, there's whole households where people can't read and write. How do you administer medicine to a baby when you can't read and write? How dangerous does that get? So what I'm saying is we can't underestimate the impact that adult literacy has on our whole communities, on our whole societies, and certainly the impact it has on our very young and our aged and frail, one of which I'm becoming very quickly, I guess. But I just want to tell you some really quick stories. In Burke, the campaign, as people became more literate, had a significant impact on crime and health. That came from the police and from an Aboriginal medical service. In Angonia, it had a significant impact on kids and health. In fact, the principal at the Angonia school wrote that the kids in years 1 to 3, when they came back after the long school break, instead of having to go through 2 or 3 weeks of revision, their literacy had actually improved. They probably hated their newly literate parents for reading to them over the Christmas holidays, but nonetheless, that was a significant outcome. In Bree, it was about unity, it was about health, and it was about active citizenship. The General Manager of the Bree Shire wrote a testimony to us, which shocked me when I got it, but nonetheless wrote a testimony about how people had engaged in the political process in Brewarrina, purely and simply because they had improved their literacy. In Wollmaringal, it brought the community together. It's a little town of 60 people, one street, with a road that enters that street right in the middle, and people are divided by that road. And for the first time, the two facilitators, people in the same position as Janelle, hadn't spoke since they were 6-year-old kids at school, and now joint facilitating the literacy campaign. What our communities are seeing is that people are working together. Instead of what we've been used to, which is the things that I refer to as the agencies that are competing for a clientele within our communities and getting our communities divided among themselves about which agency they should be accepting a service from, which agency they should be going to for assistance. If that's what we see, how can our communities be otherwise than divided? So part of what the Literacy for Life campaign does is bring people together to support something positive happening in the community, taking the shame away from the people with low literacy and bringing that shame to where it belongs. And the shame of low literacy in Indigenous communities and in broader Australia doesn't belong with people with low literacy. It belongs with the literate. We should never have allowed this to happen. In a first world country with more resources than most other countries in the world, Aboriginal people at the very least have 40% of its population have low literacy. So I term them honourable and dishonourable programs, and why I'm working with the Literacy for Life Foundation is simply this. When we go to the community has to do the work. The community has to buy in. The community has to do it for themselves. That's the very first conversation we have. We provide the training, we provide the support, but they do the work. They do the socialisation, they do the mobilisation of the community, they do the teaching in the classroom, and they coordinate the post-literacy component of this campaign model. I term it honourable and dishonourable programs because I just come to the conclusion that I don't think it's possible to deliver a dishonourable program in an honourable way. And I think our communities over the years have become afflicted by this. So it's just so important that our communities become literate and take control of the process. And one of the things that we get back constantly from the communities in which we work is that it's the first time something has come to town where they have been given ownership, total ownership of the process, total ownership of the doing. A working group is set up to advise us. If there's an argument in the class, we don't make a decision on that. We go to the working group, which is made up of every factional group or family group within that very community. Someone asked me the other day, what is the answer? And I think that is so unfair that Aboriginal people, we're always asked, what's the answer? Because I come from Brewarrina, haven't lived there for almost 50 years, and people say, what's the answer in Brewarrina? How unfair is that? Seriously? I don't know what the answer is, nor do I know it anywhere. But what I do know, what I absolutely know, is that the answer to not only our health problems, but our engagement with the criminal justice system, every issue in our communities, the answer is in the communities. Literacy will enable people to find those answers among themselves. And when they do, I'm sure they'll tell us what they are. But to ask me what that is, I don't know. But if I was to have one stab at saying, what is the answer? Or what is part of the answer? And I said this to a fellow the other day when he asked me the question. I said, if you're talking about a gift to Aboriginal children, if you're talking about an inheritance that we can leave behind, if you are talking about a legacy that we're going to pass on to Aboriginal children, then the best gift you can give those children is a literate mother. Thank you.
What I was going to say is, as a lifetime ambassador of the Indigenous Literacy Foundation, I see a direct link between literacy and self-determination. And only when we are self-determined as individuals, by being able to make decisions around our health and well-being, will we be self-determined as a nation of peoples. I understand there's been a very small connection between the ILF and your foundation. Ben, did you want to just mention that really briefly? And then we're going to take questions from the floor. Melissa, can you grab the mic? Thanks. Didn't you have an engineering degree? It's on.
Okay. Yes, we've been trying to just coordinate our efforts so that, part of the process when students go through the campaign, there's a graduation ceremony. And for instance, at the Burke graduation, we managed to get the Indigenous Literacy Foundation to provide us with a pack of books for each of the graduates. So I think there was a kids' book, there was a cookbook, and there was some other sort of book. But people loved it. And so we're hoping that we can continue that sort of coordination.
Excellent. I think one of the issues people don't realise is, particularly if we live in a city, is that we are blessed with fantastic local libraries and school libraries that aren't in existence in remote communities or smaller country towns. So it is also a resourcing issue. Do we have questions from the floor? Yes, we have a question here. Could you just please put the mic? Jack, I'll ask a question while Summer's running up there. What's the future of the foundation look like to you in 5 years' time?
The doctor's hogging the microphone over there. Look, the future is I'm actually off to Toomala, Boggabilla next week to start having talks with the community about whether they actually want the campaign there and what they can do to support it. And that's the beginning of handing over ownership. And we launch the campaign itself, and we're in phase 1 now out in Walgett in northwest New South Wales, and so we'll be launching there on the 15th of December. So it is starting to gather momentum, and our problem, as is everybody's problem, is the demand far outweighs the resources.
We've got a gentleman there.
Stuart Kinner from Griffith University. Thanks for the presentation and congratulations on a terrific program. I was watching the video and listening to the lady saying how her son was doing the program until he went to prison. And I thought, isn't that a shame? So I wondered if there were any plans or aspirations to make this program available for people who are incarcerated.
Yeah, the campaign, or the Literacy for Life, is a joint, or it's a partnership between corporations and government at the moment. And one of a private individual is very keen to fund a campaign out at Yetadanagal, just out of Brewarrina, which is a prison farm out there. So there is plans to do that. Yep.
Summer?
Thank you. First, let me acknowledge country where we're meeting on the Kulin people. Jack, thank you very much. I'd like to thank that lady, Janelle, in the middle. And Jack, with funding, like out in the community, but schools too, with a high percentage of Aboriginal students, they get a lot of funding and they have to be accountable for that funding. Is it possible, and I don't know, or is it an avenue, we're all right if you're working like that and you're doing wonderful things with literacy, and I agree with everything you said, Jack. Is it possible then that the schools can come to the party with some funding, because when our children learn to read, well then it's better for the school too. So is there an avenue there where you can link into the schools to put some funding towards your community reading and literacy?
We certainly try and partner with the schools, and the schools partner with us because they get the correlation between having literate parents and literate children, and there's no doubt about that. The jury's been in on that for 100 years. The trouble with money and schools having money, it's almost like blackfellas with yellow belly or porcupine. They're very reluctant to part with it, and so it's really, we'd love to get a hold of it and do that, but they do support us in other ways other than financial. Yeah.
Ben, you and I had a bit of a chat before we came in earlier, and the health sector's not my area, but you mentioned a phrase, health intervention. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Well, I briefly mentioned it before,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
I mean, what Marmot says is that health is a reflection of equity within society. So, and I think, it's quite a neat little saying. So it seems to me that what literacy does is actually improves, often in small ways, but it nevertheless improves the control people have over their lives. That goes some way to closing equity, and that's why I see this program as a health intervention. Its ultimate aim is to improve the health and well-being of the whole community, and I think Jack might have alluded to this, that we tend to see literacy as an individual characteristic, whereas this program recognises that literacy is a population characteristic. And that's different to individuals being literate. I don't know whether that answers.
Yes, and we've tweeted out the link to that Boyle lecture if people wanted to have a listen to that as well, so thanks for that. Are there any questions? We're right on time, and we're not on Koori time. We've got 1 minute, but I wanted to ask Janelle what the future looks like for you now that you're going to take your public speaking on the road. Obviously, you're a role model now to so many people, and I imagine there's a bit of pressure, but privilege to that too.
In the future, I'd like to be somebody like Jack. Yep.
Well, he keeps threatening to retire, but that's not working. So on that note, can we please thank our panel today for their expertise?